Hi there. I wanted to talk a little bit today about how you know if you need a psychotherapist. This is a question I get asked often, and sometimes it's hard to tell, right? There's such a stigma around mental health and psychotherapy, and then shopping for the right fit, the right therapist, and then there's the cost, right? Do they take your insurance? Do they not take your insurance? What is the self pay rate? It's a lot of legwork, and I totally get why people sometimes shy away from taking care of themselves. I totally get it. So, I will just start off by saying, in my personal opinion, my personal belief is that everyone needs a psychotherapist. I've had several. In my adult life, I've had many. And, something that people don't know is that back in the day when I was in graduate school, um, a long time ago, it was mandatory for students who were learning to do psychotherapy or in graduate programs for psychology. It was mandatory for us to have a therapist to uncover some of our own mental blocks. I guess before we got out there and start helping people uncover their own mental blocks. And that's just something that's a tradition that I continued once I graduated from my doctoral program. um, I've had several therapists in my life, and honestly, I wish there was not such a stigma around mental health, or there was not such a stigma around mental health when I was younger, and that my parents got me into therapy. I think I would have avoided a lot of pitfalls in life if I was more self aware. At this point, I use therapy on a as needed basis when I'm going through something hard or I just want an extra push. I also use coaches. I find it to just be good mental health hygiene to be able to bounce stuff off of someone else. Um, the other thing is that a lot of people don't realize the mind body connection. So they'll go in for their primary care physician or another doctor if they have a physical complaint or medical complaint, but they won't take care of their mind the same way. Um, and the mind and body are connected. It's a holistic approach to self-love and self-help. So, how do you know when you definitely need to speak to a therapist or your primary care doctor? Here's a litmus test. If you are experiencing symptoms that interfere with your daily life, if you're unable to do things or live life fully because of your symptoms, that's a good time. That's a way to kind of say to yourself, I need to speak to someone. So, for example, you know, I have a fear, or I used to have a fear of flying. And for a long time, like a lot of people have a fear of flying, right? But for a long time, my fear of flying or my phobia prevented me from traveling. So I just would not travel. I was perfectly okay with not seeing the world and only going to places that I could get to by bus or driving or a train, um, which is totally illogical because most people know that flying is safer than driving. But that was my phobia, and it was holding me back from living my life completely. In addition, um, my fear of flying came from a specific trauma. So a lot of people know that I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I remember vividly when Air Florida Flight 90 crashed into the Potomac River. And I remember being a little girl, um, you know, not watching the news, but being in the vicinity around all the adults that were watching the news. And I remember vividly what that day felt like in Washington, D.C. Um, so that happened years ago. But to be honest, since that day, I never wanted to fly. I remember the rescue and seeing people in the Potomac River when it was frozen over. Um, so to make a long story short, that's just an example of when like I wouldn't have passed my own litmus test, right? Like that phobia was holding me back from life. That phobia was directly related to a trauma I had experienced and not processed. So that is an example of when it's time to seek out your own mental health provider or someone to take care of your mental health because it's impeding your life. So I hope I made that very clear. I'm no longer scared to fly. I mean, I do need a little help sometimes, but that's just an example of how you kind of can do a litmus test for yourself. Below, I've also linked a old video that I did for Good Morning America about psychological disorders, and again, how you can, um, you know, figure out if you can handle something on your own, with all the self-help books, videos, coaching courses, all that stuff, and when you need to seek out professional help. Also, my link to book a session with me is below. There eventually, not now, but later, will be links on coursework that you can purchase for a fee, to just help with your self help journey. And I hope that helps. Okay, guys. Bye bye.